Good morning. My name is Benjamin Gadan. I'm Deputy Director of the Wilson Center's Latin American program. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. Today's Wilson Center conversation is our program's first in 2022 and the start of an ambitious series of dialogues on the biggest opportunities and challenges in Latin America, from post-pandemic recovery and the elections in Colombia and Brazil to democratic backsliding, renewable energy, and the Summit of the Americas. This afternoon's discussion, Latin America's lithium and the future of renewable energy in the United States, addresses two of these themes: environment and economic prosperity. Latin America is home to more than half of the world's lithium. For most of the region's history, lithium was overshadowed by other underground riches, from gold and silver to oil and gas. Today, however, lithium is suddenly among the most talked about minerals. As an essential input for rechargeable batteries, it is highly sought after for electric vehicles and for storing renewable energy. Simply put, the global energy transition that must urgently occur to combat climate change depends heavily upon supplies of the lightest metal. Lithium is relatively plentiful, so what's the big deal? The problem is that not nearly enough is being produced. Just a handful of countries, including Australia, Argentina, Chile, and China, account for most lithium production. In many other places, including the United States, steep regulatory obstacles slow lithium production and discourage critically needed investment. So as demand for so-called white gold skyrockets and prices rapidly rise, governments, CEOs, and climate advocates are growing increasingly anxious about potential supply bottlenecks. And this includes the United States government. A recent report from the US Geological Survey warned that lithium supply security has become a top priority for technology companies in both the United States and in Asia. For its part, the White House includes lithium among the, quote, primary upstream supply chain vulnerabilities for the domestic production of batteries, a priority for the Biden administration. By the way, if you're interested in a broader discussion of the critical minerals supply chain, I do recommend a recent Wilson Center report, The Mosaic Approach, that you can find on our website, wilsoncenter.org. To learn more about lithium, however, I give you no reading assignments. Instead, our very own Lithium Triangle initiative, dedicated to supporting the sustainable development of Latin America's vast lithium resources, brings you today insights from three individuals who are actually producing lithium in Latin America. All of them, Guillermo Callo, Chief of Staff at Buenos Aires-based Allchem, Jonathan Evans, CEO of Vancouver-based Lithium Americas, and Stephen Promnitz, CEO of Australia-based Lake Resources, operate in the so-called Lithium Triangle. That's the famous salt flats of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. All of them understand the immense financial, technical, environmental, social, and political challenges that must be overcome for Latin America to help drive the global energy transition. I'm also thrilled to introduce Helena Matza, who until recently served as Director of Climate Diplomacy and Energy Transformation on the National Security Council staff at the White House. She now serves as Director of the State Department's Office of Energy Transformation. Helena will help us understand the US government's strategy to assure adequate supplies of lithium and the opportunities for ally shoring, that is to say, supporting production of critical industrial inputs in friendly and geographically convenient countries. We'll also ask Helena to discuss China's dominance, not only of battery production, but increasingly of lithium mining, including in the Western Hemisphere. These days, China refines 60% of the world's lithium. Finally, we'll discuss the state of the United States climate policy on a day when we learn that US emissions rose 6.2% in 2021. Lower emissions than pre-pandemic, but certainly a step in the wrong direction in terms of US climate performance. Before we begin, I want to thank our co-sponsors for this event, the Wilson Center's Environmental Change and Security Program and the China Environment Forum. And I want to turn over the conversation to my colleague, Patricia Vasquez, a global fellow in our Latin American program and the moderator of today's important discussion. Patricia joins us from Buenos Aires. Patricia, thanks so much for your help.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and to be the moderator of this incredible panel. And since you have done the introductions, I suggest we just dive into it. I will be asking one initial question to each of the panelists, and I will give you 1 minute to answer. And then after each question, after that answer, I will open the floor to each of the other panelists in case they want to comment on that if they so wish to, and I will give them a few seconds for that. To the audience, we ask to please submit your questions through the events page. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And since we have a lot of ground to cover, I suggest we just dive into it. And I would like to ask my first question to Helena. It's about the Biden administration's ambitious targets for fighting climate change, from cutting carbon emissions by half in 2030 to establishing that 50% of new vehicles should be electric by 2030. The supply of lithium will be key for setting that process in motion. But for the moment, however, lithium production in the US is quite small, and it will remain so until upstream projects come to life. So the US is at the moment importing its lithium, and Argentina and Chile are already among the main lithium suppliers to the US. So my question to you is there room for increasing collaboration between Latin America and the US? And if you could tell us a little bit about how the Biden administration envisions the development of the lithium relationship with producing countries in Latin America. The floor is yours. You have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Delighted to join you all today. Let me just share some kind of top line views, and we can dive a little bit more in as the conversation goes. As Patricia mentioned, the administration is very aware that this is a pivotal moment as we start to tackle the climate crisis. Isn't it just a challenge for future generations, but a challenge of today? And the president has been clear since his first leader summit on climate in April to his remarks in Glasgow just last month and everything in between, that we're at an inflection point and have the ability to invest in ourselves and build an equitable clean energy future. We know that we don't have time to waste. And lithium, as well as other minerals like cobalt, nickel, and rare earths, are necessary for us to realize the energy transition away from unabated fossil fuels into that decarbonized energy future. Our ability to deploy clean energy technologies like EVs, large-scale battery storage, and wind power depends immensely on these minerals. And there's been a lot of work done at home through our executive order on American supply chains and the 4 critical supply chains, including large-scale batteries, and our work on critical mineral inputs that weigh heavily on our ability to address this challenge. But it's not just at home. A big part of this will be working with allies and partners. Latin America has some of the most abundant concentrations of energy minerals, especially lithium. The region will be a key player moving forward as we work together. And the growing clean energy mineral trade presents an economic opportunities for countries in the region that can also benefit the citizens in both those supply and demand countries. So in short, the US is working with Latin American countries on developing that regional supply chain and understands that's an important element, not just from the mining, but all the way through processing, refining, and end-use recycling. That will be incredibly essential to our overall energy and economic security.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you very much for that answer. And I will now open the floor to the other panelists. Perhaps you want to answer the same question, but from a business perspective. What do you think the Biden administration could do from your perspective to increase collaboration in the lithium industry with Latin American countries? And I will give you 35 seconds. Would you like to start, Guillermo?
Look, I'll start on that one. So Steve Promnitz, Lake Resources. We're actually not in production yet, but we are developing a project. So we're 2.5 years from production. And the way we've financed that has been using export credit agency support. Export credit agencies for decades have been a key financing factor And I think that the US, together with their downstream participants, EV makers and battery participants, could work together to assist the finance. Because the development of lithium in Latin America has, up until the last year, has been crimped due to access to finance. And that would be one way to assist.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. Anyone else would like to jump in? Guillermo?
Yeah, I agree with the comment on financing. I think it's key for some of the projects in Northwest Argentina. The other point, I think it's access to technology. I think the United States has a lot of development going on technology. We are looking a lot of that technology. Logistics and supply chain, I think it's another point that there's some area for synergies there with the US. Most of the operations in Argentina are using soda ash coming from the US. That's an opportunity to lower down cost sending a product to the US. So, and energy, it's another area where we can improve our energy matrix in our operations with renewable energy, solar. So I think US can also bring a lot of support, technology, and expertise in those areas.
Thank you, Guillermo. Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, look, there's things that can be done beyond the typical setup with the Exim Bank to allow US companies to participate more freely in this, to sort of take a page of what's done in Japan and Korea, and actually now increasingly in China, to help with financing. Look, it's there's challenges when you're underwriting a loan to Argentina, we all know that. But it seems that other countries outside the US are comfortable with loan guarantees and backups from their own governments. And I think we can take a page out of the same book. Like I know the resources in the US and Latin America really well. We're not going to be independent on lithium in North America anytime soon, if ever. And things like continental brines are the best resources are in the Lithium Triangle. The US is sedimentary and spodumene. The continental brines that exist in the US are relatively low quality. And we could talk about that more in terms of extraction methods. But I agree with the other gentleman, but I think there's some ways that the government can think differently about how they do loan guarantees and how they work with US companies to engage in Latin America.
You seem to all agree on loan guarantees as being key. Are there any conversations going on with the US government on these issues? Whoever wants to jump in.
I've only had conversations with the Exim Bank, and they're quite willing for equipment and those types of things. If you look at OPEC, I believe there were some options there, but I don't, frankly, from my last discussion with them, their strategy has changed, and I was told that that's probably very unlikely now, that they would be interested in loans to support projects in Argentina, given Argentina is seen as a developed country, but also we also know the currency risk, which is it's real.
So if I could just add a little bit on top, and thank you all for those reflections. They're incredibly important as we're working not only with the private sector directly, but through our embassies and our government counterparts in Latin America on these important issues. So just want to flag the new and improved OPIC, which is now the Development Finance Corporation, is in fact looking at a series of different types of opportunities as their mission, as Jonathan referenced, has shifted and has included an evolution to ensure that there is an element, a greater percentage of their projects that are climate forward. So I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of another agency, but this is certainly an issue set that has come up in many of our conversations with our DFC colleagues as we think about the whole suite of tools of how we actually help these projects come to bear. And we know that that is an important element among several others that I am sure we will discuss today.
Okay, thank you very much for that, for answering that question. And let's move on to our second question. And this I will direct it to Guillermo, and then After he answers, I will open the floor to the others. Guillermo, your company operates Olaroz, which is one of two projects currently developing lithium in Argentina, and that is in operation. And you're doing that in association with Toyota and GEMSE, the Jujuy provincial lithium company. That alliance with Toyota is an example of what seems to be a new, rather unique, I would say, trend among OEMs that are trying to secure lithium supplies by getting directly involved in the upstream, which is not an area of their expertise normally. That is one of the examples. Another example in Argentina is BMW, which has an association with Livent to source lithium. Seem to see much of that kind of partnership with American OEMs. I was wondering if you, Guillermo, could comment a little bit about this trend and where do you see it going and what it means for you, an upstream company. The floor is yours.
No, yeah, we have an excellent experience and relationship with Toyota in Olaroz. We have the operation currently ongoing in Jujuy, and part of it also a partnership with the province through GEMSE, as you mentioned. We are now expanding that operation. We are in the finalizing the expansion this year, so that shows that it has been a successful relationship. We also have a project in Catamarca that it's 100% owned by Allkem now. But yes, we see a lot of interest from OEMs to find a partnership or offtake agreements. So there is interest from Asian companies, European companies. I haven't seen, yes, we have some contact with the US companies, but it's mostly from Asia and from Europe currently. But the trend is in that direction. Now they want to be partners in the production of raw materials. That is a way to secure the product with offtake agreements through that partnerships. So I think that's a very good way to also capitalize the project, ways of partially financing the project. And I think it's something that we're going to see a lot more in the coming years.
Right. Thank you, Guillermo. Helena, do you see this kind of partnership between OEMs and upstream producers expanding to perhaps include the Fords and the GMs of the world?
Thanks. It's a great question and something that we've been in discussion with our.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me? It's a great question and something that we've been in conversation with across the whole lithium-ion battery supply chain, right? The whole value proposition. And our understanding is that OEMs are really pursuing a variety of different options and working really closely, not only with the upstream production, but with battery manufacturers all across the value chain, trying to learn about the opportunities and different chemistries that will be available to them. So I see a world where this will be an absolute part of the business proposition for US car companies, among several others, as we continue to evolve and learn more about the types of batteries that will serve in our EVs.
Any idea why we're still not seeing US OEMs entering into these kind of agreements in Latin America, I guess, or? Helena, do you any comment on that, or?
Sure. That's something that we'll have to continue to watch. I would be curious for hearing from my private sector colleagues about any conversations or reflections that they have on the topic as well.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, if I could just comment there, we need to understand a couple of key things here. We've identified the supply chain risk of lithium. We need more lithium. And most of the electric vehicle makers understand that that is a risk. But vehicle makers historically have been more familiar with people providing them services. providers of gearboxes, brakes, what have you, they are not familiar with going all the way to the upstream end of the products that actually go into batteries. And I think we need to be aware of that. Many of the OEMs that we're talking to, and I'm sure it's the same for the other companies, they have their product procurement team, but this is not something that they're actually familiar with. So what we've done in our conversations with offtake is we've been putting together tripartite agreements where you have the end user, which may be one or two electric vehicle makers, and the battery makers that they partner with. And so then we have conversations with their battery makers or cathode makers, and then ourselves. And they end up being tripartite agreements so that the electric vehicle makers know that they're going to get those products, but they don't necessarily have to get fully engaged in that whole process. I think we're going to see more of what Toyota did, but that is very much something that you will see from China, from Japan, from Korea. They have a different business model. I think the way forward is actually just open dialogue and actually those sorts of tripartite agreements, because the risk, of course, to OEMs is that they sign up agreements with battery makers, but there's just no product to go into those batteries. And that would really be a major risk for the delivery of electric vehicles going forward.
Very interesting what you just said about tripartite agreements. I wonder if that will open the door for battery making industry to develop in Latin America in the medium term. Jonathan, you want to comment on all this?
Sure. So I do think you'll see OEMs sooner than later. In our discussions, at least, they're starting to become much more educated, the larger ones. So US and I'll say European, building out the kind of expertise they need in their teams. And there's a want to have stability in pricing and an understanding that equity investments, even more so than financing, part ownership will allow that pricing that they're looking, because they're investing now for 40 or 50 years in assets too that have the ability to expand. So I think you'll see that it's taken a while, and of course pricing has had to go up now, or it's starting to get people's attention. First, the OEMs and the battery companies, and that, wow, this is really important, and I'm starting to feel this cost. But on the other end, folks on our end, these are expensive to build. I mean, the project, I was asked today a question on a Bank of America conference, if I was going to start today at Cauchari to build this 40,000 ton facility, would it be more expensive? Absolutely. It'd be close to $1 billion. These are not immaterial numbers. So, but for a company that, we'll say a US OEM, an investment of a couple $100 million for an offtake at cost, it's very much a good return on your investment. So I think you'll start to see that, but it's taken a little while for people to really get interested. It's taken the last year. I think this year will be an interesting times.
Thank you. Thank you all. Of course, this is all new to everybody, it seems, the lithium industry in general, and also to OEMs and everybody. So why don't I go directly to the next question, and this one is for Jonathan. The United States is a powerhouse when it comes to fostering technology and innovation, both in the private, through the private and the public sector. Your company will start producing lithium in Argentina, I believe, towards the end of this year, and it also continues to expand there. You're also developing the largest lithium deposit in the United States. So my question to you is, if you could give us an idea of the synergies and differences that you have encountered since you're operating in both Latin America and the United States, and if there is any room for collaboration that is either already taking place or that it's planned. The floor is yours, Jonathan.
So synergies, a lot of synergies around sharing knowledge around geology, around where you find these deposits, how you, where to look, how to hunt for them, how to determine whether they're going to be economic or not. We've learned a lot through our work with continental brines, with spodumene, with sedimentary deposits, and then also on the processing side. So we have a group in Latin America, but we're in the midst now of building a very large technical development center in Reno, which it'll have the entire circuit for Thacker Pass under it, but also a much larger analytical laboratory and other equipment for us to be able to work on things like unlocking value and resources. Brine deposits, for instance, in South America, new technologies, which, like I know Steve is working with Lilac and other companies like that. I have experience with that at FMC with selective absorption, which is those types of things are all going to be routes that we can take. And those types of technology and those synergies can be applied globally. South America, North America, something we really need to leverage, and something companies really haven't done too much of because the industry was really small. Now it's exploding. And it takes a while to figure out how to deploy these things.
Okay, Steve, would you like to comment on that?
Just following on from Jonathan's comments, that up until the last 2 years, or actually really the last 12 months, there hasn't been an economic driver for new technologies. So the technologies that are proven, they've been used for decades, and they work. We can argue about how efficiently they work, but they work. So there hasn't been an economic driver for it. But in the last 15 months, we've seen pricing of lithium increase more than 200%. And that's because the demand that we could see was coming actually came on quite quickly. And unfortunately, any lithium project takes time to develop. It takes, a good 5 years, somewhat longer if we include the exploration phase. So now there is an economic reason to use new technology. And that's, as Jonathan mentioned, that's one of the reasons why we partnered with Lilac. Lilac have a particular, very well-known water treatment technology. They're out of California. And all they did was adapt that water treatment technology to lithium extraction. And the thing is, as Jonathan said, you've got to do the test work. You've got to find first the technology, then you've got to ensure that it works for your particular project, and then you've got to do the test work. But I do think that technology is going to become a key driver. And why is that? Because the economics that drive it, let's just look at traditional methods. You're leaving half of the resource in your waste because you're only recovering about half of it. And whether that's 45% or 55%, but most of these direct extraction methods, regardless of which one you use, are going to recover at least 80, if not 90% of the product. And if you're seeing a high price product, technology is a way to do it. The second thing with technology is you can come to market more quickly because you don't have to spend the time to develop evaporation ponds. You can actually bring that product to market more quickly. So I think that shareholders, the economics, some of the debt support is actually going to drive that sort of technology. And as you quite rightly said, the US has been a powerhouse. It's always been East Asia or the US that comes up with new technologies. I have to say the Chinese are continuing well in this. We're seeing BYD, Gangfeng, Minmetals coming up with ways that they've demonstrated that work in China. And I think we're going to see more of that in Argentina. So it behoves all of us here to get more of those US-driven technologies. And the great thing about US technologies is they will support it with equity. They'll actually put their money where their mouth is and drive that change where others could be a little more cautious.
Helena, do you see room for fostering these kinds of strategic partnerships in a sort of win-win scenario where Latin America gets the technologies, the aid it needs to develop its huge resources, and the US obtains the raw materials it needs?
Yeah, I absolutely do. As many of those who just spoke alluded to and said directly, right? The global lithium ion battery market's expected to grow 5 to 10-fold by 2030. If we go anywhere near hitting our climate ambition and targets, which our administration is deeply committed to, the demand for lithium can go up as much as 4,000% by 2040. We need to think about as many diverse, resilient, and transparent the supply chain opportunities as possible for lithium ion batteries. The US is taking a really strong kind of two-pronged approach to this effort. So I think many of you have been able to read our 100-day supply chain report coming out of the White House's executive order on supply chains, which is doing some of the work that our colleagues just referenced on continuing to promote US innovation in this space. Our Department of Energy has a lithium ion battery roadmap. We are working through our FEMP program and our loan guarantee program to continue to foster that innovation. The work we do at the State Department is focused on that exact question, which is how do we work with our allies and partners to achieve these goals? We have a few programs in particular that we really focus these efforts on. One is our Energy Resource Governance Initiative, which we fondly call ERGI. It's a program that we launched with our founding partners in 2019, including Peru. ERGI works to ensure that clean energy supply chains are diverse and resilient, and the program's actively engaged in Latin America. We work on a variety of different issues, including developing a toolkit that reinforces some of the best practices in mining and development. And we work really closely with our private sector counterparts on how they're navigating through issues from the initial mapping of mineral resources to closure and reclamation of mines. So there's a million opportunities out there for us to participate. And those are just kind of a few overarching thoughts, but we have a great deal of technical assistance and support targeted at these very issues today and are continuing to prioritize those as the US government.
Excellent, thank you. Guillermo, before I give you the floor to make your comment, we're having some issues with the websites and questions from the audience are not coming through. So please send your questions via Twitter at LATAMProg. Again, via Twitter at LATAMProg. Thank you. Guillermo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't want to reiterate what John and Steve were saying, but clearly technology is something that we need. The demand for more volume is driven by better recoveries, faster time to market from the brine to the lithium. So technology is key there for producers. And also quality is another demand that we are receiving more and more from the buyers. So quality requires automation, efficiencies in the process. So technology, and we know the excellent technology background and experience that the US has, and also the people that can support that technology. That is something that clearly we are going to be demanding as producers in the next months and years now.
Thank you, Guillermo. And talking about technology, Steve, your flagship project in Argentina uses a new technology, the direct lithium extraction, DLE, that significantly reduces brine production timeframes. And my understanding is that although I understand it's still in an environmental stage. So without getting too technical, this is not a technical audience, I was wondering if you could give us an idea of, regardless of which technology ends up being used, DLE or something else, whichever, to reduce brine production times, do you think that reduction, reducing the production times, will be enough for Latin America to continue to further develop its lithium industry? Or are there other issues that come up there that you think would also need to be addressed? The floor is yours.
First of all, the size of the demand we're looking at, there's a group called Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. They recently came out and said that demand at the moment is increasing at about 3 times the rate of new supply. So basically we need every project, and we're going to need every methodology coming to the fore. So I'm not saying that technology is one magic wand and will solve everything. The particular process we're using, ion exchange, it's very well-known water treatment. One of the key advantages you get, as Guillermo mentioned, is you get a high-quality product, first of all, because you just take the lithium out. And delivering high-quality products, it doesn't matter which product it is, everybody wants a better quality product, and it's particularly important in the new batteries. Second thing is that you come to market more quickly. So you can develop a project, you can expand a project, and then when you turn it on, your commissioning timeline, we're talking a couple of months instead of perhaps a year. So you can come to market more quickly. Then last of all, as we move through this energy transition to electric vehicles, we don't want to repeat the sins of the past. And so one of the benefits of direct extraction is you can lower your water impact, you lower your impact on the land as well. And so ESG outcomes are very important, and they deliver better social outcomes. So I think that's part of the solution, and I'm not saying it's all of it, but these are the sorts of things that we can bring to bear to the sector. I do want to remind everybody, it was mentioned earlier on, this is still relatively new. I mean, we've been producing lithium for decades, but the growth in batteries and electric vehicles has really only happened in the last 5 years. And most of the growth we've seen in EVs has only been in the last 18 months. Be that as it may, we've got to all step up to the plate and come up with ways of doing it. And I do think that, look, one of the benefits of developing brines is we're not doing mining. This is just water treatment. It's just a chemical industry. It's put in the bag of mining. And I actually think that more support from ESG-minded investors could also assist in that development together with some of the other financing we're talking. Otherwise, we're going to see East Asia pretty much driving the development in Latin America again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve. So we're talking financing, technology, quality, all key issues to try to create synergies between the US and Latin America. And we also talked a little bit about the environment in your answer there. So the next question for all of you is about the opposition that the lithium industry, the development of the lithium industry has encountered due to its possible environmental and social impacts. It's about the excessive use of water, about possible contamination to aquifers that feed local communities, about the impact of the operations on the wildlife, on cultural sites, et cetera, et cetera. And this opposition goes from Latin America to Nevada and California. So what do you think governments in Latin America, both federal and local governments, could do to try to mitigate the effects of lithium developments on the environment and on social effects? I have heard a lot in Latin America about the need to carry out their more sophisticated technical studies. Again, we go back to technical issues about the brine deposits to better understand the effects of the impact of the lithium industry in those specific brines. Each brine deposit is different. So that's, I think, what they're talking about. The US Geological Service has done several studies on that, but apparently from what I hear, more is needed. They're calling for more sophisticated technologies for measuring the impact of the industry. So is that something where the US and Latin America could deepen their relationship in a way that could be beneficial for both? And Helena, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. And let me share a little bit about the type of work we're already doing in the region through our Energy Resource Governance Initiative. As you aptly put, environmental, social, and governance standards are of the utmost importance in consideration of how we're developing our mining sectors, not just for the importance of the overall transparency, but at the end of the day, there's so many elements that will make sure that we have responsible, stable, and diverse supply. We're incredibly focused on that and support those efforts through our ERGI engagements. And we recognize that mining production is critical. And as we're thinking through not only the extraction and the diversifying of processing facilities, that we need to work with our partners and are doing so in Latin America on greenhouse gas emissions, water use, soil erosion, biodiversity loss, worker safety rights, community consultations, and continually adding additional elements to our ongoing technical assistance. In short, we know that governance is what really matters here. And as we collectively ramp up the deployment of clean energy technologies that that will require these commodities, that needs to be top of mind. We've been working with our partners in the region on a far-ranging set of topics, from fiscal regimes and regulatory compliance, market competitiveness, mineral geology, and environmental regulation. Maybe to just share one of our partnerships, since 2019, our bureau at the State Department has been working in collaboration with the government of Argentina's Secretary of Mining on joint technical cooperation on sustainable brine lithium development. This ongoing cooperation has covered so much of our technical work. We've expanded to work on hydrogeological modeling and have upcoming assistance focus on expanding the considerations around those environmental practices. Also, focus on associated power sector planning to meet the country's industrial renewable targets. So this is really top of mind in all our engagements, both related to lithium, but overall mining sector governance at large. So really excited about the work we already have in train, and looking forward to hearing more from our private sector counterparts of some other opportunities as we continue to develop this sector at home and in the region. I'll pause there.
I may follow Patricia if you agree. The natural resources in Argentina belong to the provinces, so there are provincial efforts around studying all the basins and the salars in the different provinces. There was, for the last few years, there was a lot of private sector studies done from the salars, because when we submit our environmental impact assessments, we need to demonstrate the impacts that our activity will have in the different basins. So we have a lot of information, and what we are doing is sharing that information now with the provincial governments. The provincial government, as Helena mentioned, are engaged with the US and other agencies to study all this area. That will bring a lot more information to the governments to share with the different communities. In parallel, we also do a lot of communication with the communities. The first distinction is that brine is not fresh water, because that generates a lot of confusion. Brine has a lot of mineral salts and contaminants that make that liquid not potable. So that's the first distinction. And in several occasions, all the salars are very remote from nearby communities. So I would say that the main challenge here is communication, educating people on what we are doing, how we are doing it, and which are the impacts, because obviously an impact, it has an impact as any human activity. So that's our responsibility as private sector, and also the governments should focus a lot in communicating and educating the audience on what we are doing. As I mentioned, we do, in the process of the environmental impact assessment, public hearings. We have technical meetings with the community, with the different government offices to discuss hydrogeology, environment, flora, fauna, and that is being assessed quite thoroughly by the government and by the community. And ongoing, we have monitoring programs with the community on the different aspects of our activity, as water monitoring, soil, air, and they participate in that monitoring. So I think more and more we have to partner with the communities. We have to improve the communication from us and from the government. And I think that's what closes the gap between all these misunderstandings and lack of information.
Excellent, and thank you, Guillermo. I want to actually continue the discussion on environmental and social issues for a moment, and just give Steve and Jonathan a chance to discuss it as well. As you could imagine, lots of our stakeholders are concerned about green technologies solving one environmental problem, but potentially causing others. I think Guillermo has given a lot of good insights when it comes to what brine is as it relates to water use issues, but yet that does come up a lot, particularly in the Atacama region of Chile. It's an issue in Argentina as well, where Jonathan, I know your company operates, and Steve, where you will be producing in 2 years. So maybe just a brief response from both of you, Steve and Jonathan, starting with you, Steve, about how you see water issues and the broader questions about the environmental impacts of lithium and the importance of making sure supply chains for green technologies are themselves green. Steve, I start with you. You mentioned ESG and the need for ESG investment in this sector. So obviously this is something you've given a great deal of thought to.
It's a front of mind issue because it's a front of mind issue for local communities. All of the three companies here, we're all operating in arid environments. I grew up on a farm. We didn't have that much water. These areas, it might rain once a year, once every 5 years. So naturally, water is going to be a key issue. So anything that can be done to actually reduce the use of water, return it back to aquifers, demonstrate, as Patricia said, that you're not damaging that aquifer, that provides then the support that's required to then communicate that effectively, both to local communities and to provincial and federal governments. This is an appropriate way of development. And then one of the things that can be collaborated on is that third-party advocacy and that assistance in the communication. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's been many opportunities where there's been either infrastructure or mining development in distant locations. So that communication is very important. But I do think that water is critical. I also think that the impact on the land surface is important. It's important to distinguish between brine and fresh water, but just lowering your overall water usage is, I think, a key aspect. Naturally, people are concerned, and the only way to allay those concerns is to clearly enunciate that, have it supported across different levels. And I think that US collaboration with showing how to do these sorts of international environmental and social impact assessments is important. Because we have export credit agency funding coming from the United Kingdom and from Canada, we need to deliver not just on provincial and federal environmental and social guidelines, but also around international norms so that we can actually deliver on UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I do think that water, and the same with power, being able to have renewable energy as part of your power mix, it doesn't mean that it's 100%, but anything that you can do then improves that. Then we're looking at supply chains and logistics. Unfortunately, that's still a work in progress, but I think there will be some improvements in how we can actually truck and ship material with better energy usage in the future. These things then will engender more support from ESG investors globally. There's been a large amount of equities that has gone towards that sector. And I think this is one area that can benefit from it. I've seen it going to recycling, for example. And I've said, well, we're supporting recycling as part of your whole life cycle, but we actually have to get the raw materials into these batteries first. Otherwise, there won't be anything to recycle. And so it's important that we have those ESG aims. Look, Jonathan has experienced this directly, so I'm going to pass the mic to him.
Thanks, Steve. And it's both gentlemen have said quite a bit already. And look, I think it comes down to collaboration as well. I think I can add that, look, our companies, I talk to the CEO of Guillermo's company quite frequently. Our companies have collaborated on community engagement, on reporting, on all sorts of other things in Jujuy province in order to make sure we deliver the social benefits to the community as well. I'll be clear, there are some groups that ideologically are always going to oppose. We all need to understand that. And I think what needs to happen is we have a dialogue so that misunderstandings and information can be shared. Our industry now is subject, like all industries, to much different standards. I think what Helena's, what the State Department has done with ERGI is great. You have IRMA now, which we're in the process. I know many other companies are as well, which is a whole other standard, which many companies are aspiring to. There's many models and examples out there that we have to ascribe to, and the sustainability reporting that our companies are responsible to do is very candid, open, and is all there. So I think a lot of it has to come down to is being ready to answer questions, and also to invest for some of these programs, which goes beyond just production in terms of community benefits. The communities that we're in, as Guillermo has said, and I know, Steve, you're in Catamarca province, which I've operated there as before. These are very poor communities. The provinces want the economic development, but we need to make sure that that we do the right things. We train the workforce, and we give people economic opportunities so that they can build a long-term viable living, for not only for them, for their families. And we have the same issues in the US and same questions in the US. So I think it's a different time. Steve was a good point at the end of the day. Yeah, recycling is great, but when you have nothing to recycle, it doesn't really work. So you have to fill the supply chain up. 15 years from now, we'll have lots of batteries available to be able to recycle, like we do with lead acid batteries, but we're not there yet. And we have a huge problem that we all are experiencing right now with climate change, which is happening right as we speak. And this is one of the main things we can do is reduce our carbon emissions with the types of products that our products go into. So I think it can all be done, but dialogue, transparency, and is going to be very, very key.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I lost my internet connection. Not a good moment to lose your moderator, but here I am back. Hopefully it's going to last. So why don't we just jump to the next question? There's several questions from our audience that are related to Chinese in lithium investments in Latin America, which have been growing rapidly. In recent years, they adopted a strong presence in Latin America with Ganfeng in Argentina and Mexico, Tianqi in Chile. They were quite competitive in Chile's recent bidding round. It could be argued that the place that Chinese lithium companies are now taking in Latin America should have been a place that the US could have taken should things have gone differently. My question to Helena now is, as Latin America emerges from the pandemic, if we can ever get to that point, there's going to be room for need of a large infusion of investments to help these countries recover their economies. Could that be an opportunity for the US to reconfigure its relationship with Latin America and strengthen its links through the lithium industry? Is that something that the Biden administration is working on, is considering? Your thoughts? Floor is yours.
Sure, thank you so much. I would start by noting, I think this is something already that the US government is focused on. As we discussed earlier in this conversation, our Energy Resource Governance Initiative work has been enacted since 2019, and we continue to expand it to include all these important transparency and governance elements in the region in particular, but more broadly around the globe. At the end of the day, we think it's our job as governments to ensure that important standards around environmental, social, and good governance are part of the full lithium production business case. We are deeply interested in working in the region and have done so through various different energy dialogues, including a new critical mineral working group with Brazil, which of course covers a different kind of set of minerals that we care about. And we see, kind of a handful of main ways that we would continue to do that work. So at the top of that list is what we've spent a good deal of what we talked about today around those governance standards, around raising the bar to allow for that transparent private investment into this important sector that considers all of the elements of what makes a strong business case for lithium production. That includes thinking about the greenhouse gas emissions across the life cycle of the clean energy technologies that lithium is an important input into. And I would say ultimately also developing the enabling environment for recycling, hearing from my colleagues kind of where we are in that broader conversation. A big piece of what ERGI does and what we'll continue to expand on in the region is sharing and working with like-minded partners and unlocking all of these goals. And that will give us an opportunity to see where and how we can continue to leverage our investment tools as the US government, whether it's XM, DFC, technical assistance or guidance that posts through RFPs and other private tendering process support. There's quite a bit that we can do and plan to continue to do over the next several years. So I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. Moving on, I have a question about Chile, and we have seen a lot happening in Chile in the last few months. Starting out with Chile losing ground in the lithium industry. It used to be the world's #1 producer. Now Australia has taken the place. Chileans have picked a new president who is expected to perhaps steer Chile a little bit away from the pro-market model that the country has adopted in the past 50 years. For the mining, for the lithium industry, that might mean increased taxes, increased different regulations, plus, of course, the institutional transformations coming from the new constitution that is being produced. What are your thoughts about how Chile's institutional transformations could impact its lithium links with the US and with the world? Because we have to remember that Chile, while it has been losing ground, it is still a key lithium producer in the world. So your comments, I don't know who wants to start. Perhaps Jonathan?
Sure. I think it's a wait and see approach right now. I do believe that Argentina is and will continue to be the destination of choice for foreign direct investment. As Guillermo said, there's federal guidance and provincial, I'll say, ownership. And so from a process standpoint, it's quite easy to navigate, whereas in Chile, I think we're all familiar with Corfu and the concessions and negotiating and so forth, and the royalty scheme and additional royalties and taxes which are looking to be added onto it. At the end of the day, these are very big investments, and you want the private sector to fund them. And companies and businesses are going to look to see if there's a sufficient return on investment, and balance that with what risk is going to be too. So, I mean, the question will come with Bolivia as well, and then that'll be the other question as well. Do I have to worry about my business being nationalized? Because that's happened before. So you have real examples of that, and there's been some discussion in Chile about a national company as well. Those are very worrisome to big private multinational companies. So I think it'll give them pause.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have just a few minutes left. Does anybody want to comment on that? Steve, perhaps?
Yeah, one of the things that all governments can do, not just the US, is at least explain in a very open manner with the Chilean government, particularly with some of the members of Congress, that there is a real need for lithium production, and it can be improved to assuage some of the concerns that have been expressed by both the government, local communities, and regulators. And I think it's salutary to note that there have been many delegations, particularly out of the EU, from car makers to the north of Chile, looking specifically at this issue. Sometimes just clear communication with third-party advocacy, regardless of what the aspect is a way to actually clear the tables and avoid some of the traps. Be that as it may, it's going to take quite a long time.
Thank you, Steve. Guillermo, would you like
Yeah.
to comment?
Yeah, my comment is similar to John. I would say wait and see. The new government is going to be in office in March, although all the comments point to a direction that it's not very attractive for investment right now. There are other challenges also in Chile. Argentina is not also an easy country, but we know how to operate in Argentina. We've been operating for a while. I've been operating in different mines in Argentina for many, many years. And if you learn how to operate and to navigate in Argentina, if you finally deliver. And I think that's, I agree with John that today Argentina is the option in the region for investing and producing lithium.
I'll add just very quickly. The reason why Livent used to be FMC is in Argentina today was originally going to be in Bolivia. They asked the Bolivian Congress and Bolivian government to pass a law that would guarantee that the business would never be nationalized. This was back in the late 80s and early 90s. The government said no, and FMC decamped to Hombre Muerto, where they are today in Catamarca province. So just, that was when the industry was very small.
Right. Okay, and Helena, would you like to make some very, very short comments before we wrap up?
Sure, happy to do so. Let me say that, we have a very similar view in the U.S. government. We need to wait and see as this continues to evolve, and we see the new government come and start determining the differences between new projects and then our understanding of how existing projects will continue to be managed. So certainly an element that we track really closely here, both at Post and back home as we're working on broader governance with these countries, including Chile.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this participation. This has been wonderful. It has been really enlightening, and we really, really thank you for being here with us. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have. And I don't know if Ben is on to comment. Yes, there he is.
No, just once again to reiterate, thank you, Patricia, for the excellent moderation. Helena, very useful to hear the US engagement on this subject and the recognition that sources of lithium in the Western Hemisphere will, it appears, play a really critical role for the foreseeable future in the development of the technologies that the United States needs to address climate change, which, as I think we've all acknowledged, is not a problem that we can ignore any longer. So I thank you, Helena, for those insights. Steve, Guillermo, Jonathan, I hope we'll be collaborating again in the future. As I said in my introductory remarks, everyone acknowledges we're going to need much more of this resource. You three are playing a critical role already in trying to meet the extraordinary increases in demand. And so it's important to hear from you what kind of investment climate, technologies, support from governments in the region and externally you need to succeed and to produce sustainably with support from communities and meeting environmental objectives as well. So your work is very important. We're so glad you were part of this conversation. Thank you everyone for participating and for all of your questions and interests. And we'll continue touching this theme through our Lithium Triangle initiative and other work at our Latin American program here at the Wilson Center. Again, thank you everyone. Happy New Year and have a wonderful evening.